Yes, thanks for joining us this morning. As you know, it's one of our first training webinars that we're doing here at Metaphorix this year. This one's covering the top 10 tips in financials for NAV. My name's Adam. I think I may have met some of you before. I'm joined by Pauline, who I think a lot of you might know from the support desk. She's going to be taking us through this morning's session. Just a bit of housekeeping. As I said, if you do get any audio issues or you're struggling to see the screen, do let us know through the chat box. The session is being recorded, so if you don't quite catch everything, the video should be live in a couple of days, and we'll get that sent over to you so you can view it later on. Keep an eye out for the other upcoming webinars that we've got coming. You should be receiving a MetaSpeak mail out either this week or next week, which will have the details of the next ones that are coming up. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Pauline, and we'll get kicked off.
Thank you, Adam, and hello to everyone. As you can see from the agenda, we've got quite a lot to get through in this session. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the new functionality around the production of financial reports using account schedules that we all know and love. Historically, account schedules have always been created manually by the user, but no longer. Account schedules now can be auto-generated by Navision based on your own specific chart of accounts, and this is achieved through the use of account categories and subcategories which are attached to our GL accounts, and it is this structure that is used in the building of those reports, those account schedules for you. Additionally, these system-created account schedules are automatically updated so that if you have to change the structure of your chart of accounts, they are automatically updated, which obviously saves you having to carry out that very laborious task. So let's have a look at how this is set up. Our first port of call is our chart of accounts, and you will notice that we have two new fields: account category and account subcategory. So if we just have a look at that in a little bit more detail, we've got our account category code here. Now, these are predefined by NAV and they fall into the categories of assets, liabilities, equity, income, cost of goods sold, and expenses. However, for the account subcategories, these are totally user-defined, and it is indeed yourselves that decide what those subcategories are going to be. So to look at that in a little bit more detail, we'll go to the GL account categories, and here you will notice those categories, the assets, liabilities, etc. But then when you break open into one of those categories, you can then determine the subcategories that you want to label your GL accounts to. When you've coded up your GL accounts using these categories and subcategories, Navision will automatically calculate which fields or which accounts used within that, and it is these that feed the account schedules. So let's have a look at the account schedules. They're just the same as they always have been, but you'll notice that I have 4 here and they're preceded by a letter M. You as a user determine which are going to be the system generated account schedules, and it is these that will control our financial reports. So if I was just to go and try and edit one of those predefined account schedules, you'll notice that I get a warning that says basically that is a system derived account schedule, and that any changes that I might make manually to this account schedule might well be overwritten by the system at a later date. So basically you don't touch them once they've been created. So if we have a look, you'll notice that they are standard account schedule layout, but again, using those categories and subcategories, Navision has automatically populated our totaling fields for us. So how do we run these reports? Well, you can either run it from the account schedules, or on the Business Manager Role Center, you have this nice little icon sitting at the top, financial statement, and then you'll notice those 4 different account schedules that can be run. So we'll have a look at that income statement as we went there previously. You have options as to what dates you want to use. So I'm working in, and don't panic here, we're in a Cronus database, and Cronus, as most people probably know, always works in a year in advance. So we're 2018, so we're working in 2019. I'll simply preview that to the screen, although you've got all your normal print options, print to hard copy, Excel, or to PDF. Let's just make that a little bit bigger so we can see it. So now we can see that we have our income statement based on those categories and then the subcategories within here. So everything around your chart of accounts. Lovely little new feature, and I'm sure that will be useful to a lot of you out there. So our next port of call is standard journals. Now, this feature isn't new, but it's often forgotten, and it is the ability for us to save our standard journal lines for reuse. So it might be a case that it's about postings that might happen on average maybe 3 or 4 times a year, but to save you having to recreate those journal lines, you can actually save them as the standard journal. You can also choose whether you're going to save those lines with the value or without, and that is indeed up to you. But also, as you're going through the year, if you need to add additional lines to that standard journal, then you can do that sort of on the fly. And something else I'm going to just explain to you is the fact that within the Vision amount fields, you can actually use them as calculations. So it might just mean that you can put that old calculator away. So if we have a look at that, and from my role center, I have my general journals. And I've got a standard journal preset up here for me. You fill in it just the same way as you always would do. And in the amount field, as I said earlier, we can actually put in calculations. So in this case, my journal line is actually to do a bank transfer from my GB account to my operating account. So if I wanted to, I could put in a figure of, say, 25,000. I could then use the plus, I could use the minus sign and add additional values there. What I'm actually going to do is I want to move 25% of my £25,000 into my operating accounts, so I can just pop in asterisk for multiply 0.25 and I get the result I want, apart from it is the wrong sign. So I'll just pop in my negative sign there. Now, if this was the only line that I wanted to do, it's something that I do from time to time. I can save my journal, and it's carried out simply by Save Standard Journal. I can give it a quick code, so bank transfer, for example. I can put in a description, monthly or whatever it is, monthly transfer, GB to operating, for example. And you'll notice here that I have the ability to save the amount. So if I tick the box, then it's going to remember that amount. If I don't tick it, then the lines, when I bring them back, will not have that value there. So I'll just say OK to that, and it tells me thank you, but we have saved that. Now, another feature is to be able to use Microsoft Excel to create our journal lines. So in order to do that, I can simply click on my Microsoft Excel button on my ribbon, which will then open my journal in Excel for me. Just reform that slightly. So now I have the format of my journal lines. So within here, I'll just cheat and just copy that date down. I've got a document number here, it's already generated, so good old Excel, if I bring that down, then it's going to renumber that line for me. I can then put in the type of account that I want this line to be. So in this case, it's GL account. And I'm going to be moving some money that's been posted incorrectly, and I'm going to put a value into my telephone account. And I can just put in there that it was perhaps a misposting. Put in the amount. In this case, I just want to put in £50. Where's it going to? Again, it's going to a GL account. And this time I'm going to use account number 8240 is my balance account. And I can continue to enter lines into my spreadsheet until I have finished them all. At that point, I can just simply come and highlight using normal control copy commands, and I'll just get rid of that spreadsheet, come to my journal lines, and then paste rows. If I've got anything wrong, if GL accounts aren't present, don't exist, then I will get an error message, and of course I can pick up on my spelling mistakes as well. Okay, so once this is done, I might decide for these lines that I've copied across that I actually want them adding to that saved journal that I've just done. So I can go back into Save Journal. This time I will just simply pick up that journal lines that I've just previously saved. And again, I can make that decision as to whether I want to save the amounts or not. I'm not going to in this case. Just going to say OK, and it's saying that it already exists, which indeed it does. So I will just say to that, yes, please. And now I can post my journal in the normal way. Once the lines are posted, my journal is now blank. And now we come to the next period, the next day, the next week, whenever, and I can then get that standard journal, repopulate it in my journal lines. You notice that the document number is auto-populated because of the number series sitting behind, and indeed because I didn't tick the box to say save the value, then it does come through as 0. At this point, I can then decide if this line's not required, then I can delete the line and just carry on going back out to Excel to add more lines or whatever it is that I require to do. Moving on, the other side of our standard journals is those journals that are more of a recurring nature, and indeed we do have recurring journals inside Navision. We can set them up as being fixed, variable or balanced, and we'll have a little look at that in a moment. But what we can also do is we can add a date format so that when our journal lines are posted, it automatically will bring through the correct next period ending date for us, saving the user having to go back into the journal to update those posting dates. And with that in mind, there is also some variables that we can use in the document number field or the description field, which will auto-populate, for example, the period number, 1 for January, etc., or perhaps the name, so January, February for the next posting, and so on and so forth. So from my ribbon, I can choose recurring journals, and you can have as many batches as required set up. For example, in our Cronus database, we have accruals, we have a monthly recurring journal and utilities, etc. What I've done is actually combine them all together into one journal for us for today. First column is our recurring method, and we choose between fixed, variable, balance, reversing fixed, reversing variable, and reversing balance. In essence, the differences are, if you choose fixed, then the value on the fixed line will come through when the journal is posted. If you pick variable, then as you can see from my line here, when the line comes back after the posting, it comes back with a 0 amount. Balance, it will just take the whole of the balance of the particular GL account that you've specified on the lines. For the reversing fixed, variable and balance, simply what happens is that the journal is posted at the month-end date, and then at the same time the reversing line is posted the following day. So in the case of my top 4 entries, the reversing entry will be posted on the 1st of May, 1st of May, and then the 1st of August on my very last line here. In our recurring frequency, we can specify when and how we calculate when the next period end date will be. So if we take, for example, our 30th of the 4th, applying this formula, it simply says add a day, which takes us to the 1st of May, add a month, which takes us to the 1st of June, and then subtract 1 day, so that will bring us back to the 31st of May. And that will always work irrespective of how many days are in the month, i.e. 28, 29, 30, 31, etc. You'll notice in our document number I've put in here this syntax of %4 and then a text value, in this case rent or overruns or HP. And what Navision will do when it sees that %4, it will simply replace that with the current or the month name for the period that you're posting in. There are some other percentages, 1, 2, 4, 3 being month number, for example. So that can be quite useful when you're viewing things from your ledger entries, and we'll see how that appears when we have posted this journal. Likewise, I've also put in the %4 in the description. Again, not absolutely necessary, but I like to see it in our ledger entries. So we choose our GL account numbers that we're doing the postings to, and in the case of I fixed, I have my 2 lines which balance each other out, my reversing fixed, which again, because it's fixed, my balance, my value, I beg your pardon, is populated on the line for me. However, on my variable line, because it is variable, I don't have a value there. But if I was to put in, for example, £1,500, what you'll notice, not only has it populated the LCY figure as well, but also there is an allocation been specified here. And that is because for this particular posting on the car leasing, I actually want it to be split between our dimensions, our department dimensions, and I want it to go half between sales and admin. I can choose to put an actual value, but in this case I have chosen to put a percentage, 50% to each, but it could be 30, 70, etc. However we want to see that split. So once we have populated our line, we notice we've got some going on the 30th of April and some or one at least in July, and Navision doesn't mind that as long as the period date that we're running in will encompass all those periods. So I'm just going to post. The journal lines are posted, and you'll notice that the date has indeed moved on to the end of May for my top 4 and the end of August for my variable there. My value has been taken out. It's still showing the allocation there, but nothing is going to happen if I try to post, because it is this that it's going to be working on. One thing I did forget to say is this expiration date. In the case of postings like car leasing or hire purchase, you can specify when, for example, the hire purchase period ends, and with that expiration date in place, it means that Navision will continue to take or post that line until that date is reached. The beauty being is you can then keep that line there ready populated, and then just change it to your next hire purchase should you want to take one out. So let's have a look at what's actually been posted. So if I just go to my top line and on my navigate button, I can see my ledger entries from here, and we can see that indeed the document number is showing the month name and the description of rent, and also in our description field as well. On our reverse fixed line, we can see that the line was posted at the 30th of 4th, and that reversing line there coming through immediately afterwards on the 1st of the 5th. So that just means that there isn't any other process to carry out with those reversing journals. If we look at our variable line, we can see that we've got our July HP here, and then if we go to navigate and go drill down into our general ledger entries, we can see where that allocation has been made against the administration and against sales. We have finished now with our recurring journals. Next in our agenda is our payment tolerances. So this is the case of where you're fed up with having to write off those annoying customer underpayments. NAV can handle this automatically for you if you wish. You can write off the amounts to either discount or tolerance accounts. The choice is yours in the setup. And those amounts are written off at the time of posting the cash, so it's all done in one step. However, for those customers that you don't want to have this payment tolerance, you can exclude them from that functionality. Let us go and have a look. And the first place we'll go to is just quickly show you the setup in the general ledger setup. Actions, payment tolerance, and it is here that you determine what the rules of the tolerance is going to be. In this Cronus database, it's set up that the payment tolerance is up to 0.5%, and the maximum payment tolerance is 50p. You have complete control over what those figures are going to be. You'll notice also on the Applications Fast tab, I've said that we want it to go to a payment tolerance account, and that is set up in the posting groups, and that when payment tolerance has been detected, that I want a message on my screen so that I can check that everything is happening as it should do. To prove that working, we'll go to my sales invoices. True Blue Peter fashion, I have one set up already. Okay, so I have a purchase invoice here to Mather & Sons for a total of £1,504.44. So I will just post that invoice, and it's just telling me my date's different. That's fine, standard nav there. Do I want to have a look at the invoice? No, not really, thank you. So I would just say no. So going to my customers, I can get access to my cash receipt journal from there. So standard cash receipt journal. Pop in our posting date as you would do normally. Payment type, or type is payment. My customer. And now, as per normal, I just want to apply to that invoice. So there's my invoice, and I can set the applies ID and say OK. And then at this point, I'm now going to say that actually they have only sent us the £1,504. And there's that message because I ticked that box on the application tab, and it says an action is requested regarding the payment tolerance. Do I want to leave the remaining amount, because I may want to, or do I want to post the balance as a payment tolerance? And indeed that is the option I will take, and it tells me here that that balance is going to be 44p. So I'm going to say yes on that. I've got my balance account, so I can simply post my journal. Lovely. If we go back now to my customer account and we go into the ledger entries, we can see that we've got our payment and our invoice. They are both applied, fully applied, so the customer account is as it should be. But if we now navigate on our payment line, we can see that we have actually got 3 general ledger entries, and you'll notice that we've got that 44p, which is going to my payment tolerance account as set up in the posting group setup. As far as my bank account is concerned, though, then we have only received the £1,504, which is how we would expect it to work. Let's close down all those screens and move on to our next subject. And this is about the prepayment journal report that we can now get access to from our payment journal. So whether using the Suggest Vendor Payments function or creating the payment lines manually, quite often when a journal is created, that needs to go through to someone else for sign-off by, for example, a senior management. Historically, that has always been a little bit cumbersome, but now with the prepayment journal, it will detail all the items or the invoices that have been suggested for those payments. The manager can then simply mark off any entry not to be paid and pass it back to the user so that they can update the journal lines, and therefore that this report can speed up that process quite considerably. We will go to our payment journal, and again I've got access to that from my vendor on my role center. I have already suggested using the Suggest Vendor Payments, and it's just the standard Suggest Vendor Payments that we all know and love. And I now have my journal populated. My vendor prepayment journal option now, I can just preview that to the screen, and we can see that it does detail, if we just make that slightly larger, per our vendor all the items that now, based on the due date, is suggesting that be paid. The approver can come through, mark these entries up, those that need to be paid or those that you're going to put off for another period, and send it back to the user. Once they've received that report back, then the user can come into their journal and make the changes as requested. We always recommend that if you're going to unapply any entries, which is basically what we will be doing, that we remove the value on the journal line so that it can be populated with the new applied entries. So I'm now going to go to my apply entry screen as per normal, and perhaps that's that little invoice that the approver has said, no, not going to pay that this time. So I can simply, using the set applies to ID, which is a toggle on, toggle off command, just unapply that entry. The value has now been reduced to 88,000. So when I say OK now, that value will be populated on our journal lines. Had I left the £113,000 on the journal line, then what would have happened? The payment would have been applied to those entries that had the application mark against, but then that remaining amount, that 25,000, would have been posted on account, which wouldn't have been what we wanted at all. So at this point now, the journal is ready for posting. If it's backs, export. If it's checks, post print checks, etc. Normal process, print remittance devices, etc. Filtering. This is a favourite topic at such events, and how we can use our built-in NAV filtering functionality to be able to get to the information that we're looking for. Additionally, as well as just going through the various syntax, I'm going to show you how we can create a filtered view and save it. And I'm actually going to create a new button on our navigation pane so that I can actually show you how to save that to my own personal button, so my own distinct area that is just for me. Also, I'll show you how we can add other items, other links that may not be on our home role center, how I can actually add those to my role center. So we're on vendors at the moment, so we might as well start here. At the moment, I have my main single filter set here to the name field. If I were to type in limited, then I get every vendor that has the string of characters LTD in the name field. Now, this is literally a literal filter. It is just looking for that string of characters LTD anywhere within the name field. The difference between that and using our advanced filter down here is that if I was to do the same filter, I would get absolutely nothing, because this filter here is far more stringent on the information that you must supply. So there's some rules and some syntax to back us up on that. First of all, LTD, I put that in lowercase, so it is looking for that string of characters in lowercase. And of course, the limited, you may have noticed, began with a capital L, but you might not be too sure as to whether capitals are used or not. So if you simply precede the number of characters by the @ sign, NAV will then treat those characters as both uppercase and or lowercase and will search for both. Unfortunately, that still doesn't work though, and that is because limited, there is no vendor whose name begins with upper or lowercase limited. So we need to be able to apply a wildcard to tell the system that we're looking for a number of characters, possibly before the limited, and the asterisk is such a wildcard, and that says any number of characters. So uppercase or lowercase, any number of characters, and then LTD. And unfortunately, we're still not getting any results. And that is because, and again, you may or may not have noticed, the limited actually was preceded by a full point. Now, of course, you might not know whether someone has used a full stop or not, or any number of other characters. But if you're not sure about just one more character, instead of using the asterisk, which you could use in this situation, but you might not then get the results that you need. If it's just a single character, you can use the question mark, and that denotes just one single character. So the syntax is saying uppercase or lowercase, a number of characters before LTD, and there might be another character after that. So when we press tab or return, then we get our vendors as we did do when we just used the filter at the top here. Okay, so there are some other types of filters as well. So the one that sometimes people are not aware of is the limit totals to filter, and that's shown very well if we go to the chart of accounts. For example, on our chart of accounts, we have a net change column and a balance at date. And because we haven't set any filter on our screen at the moment, those two columns are indeed the same. So using our limit totals to, and you access that from the blue section at the top on any of your list views, and then just ticking the box. you can add a filter. And in this case, I'm going to do a date filter. So I want to look at last month. So I can just type in my date range. I didn't have to put in the year because we're in 2019 on this Cronus database. However, I did need to specify the month because the current month, as you'll notice down here, is actually June. So now when we look down at our entries, we can see that we have a net change figure and then the balance as at the system date. We can prove that by going into and drilling down into that field, and we can see that the posting date is indeed filtered just with entries dated, in this case May. Whereas when we go into our balance field, then we have all the entries from whenever we started posting into this account. So whilst we're here, we'll just look at a few more posting rules that we can do. There's T for today. So whatever your system date, it will bring through the date. Unfortunately, again, because we're Cronus, it's going to use my actual working date. But of course, Cronus is set to 2019. So in this case, it is February 2018. We can also use syntax, for example, that says, give us everything that is from the 1st of June onwards. So we can use the greater than sign there. An alternate, however, though, is at the end, you can use the 2 dots, which is the range. And again, that gives you the same result. Likewise, we can say anything before, up to and before the 1st of June. So now we can have all those entries that preceded the 1st of June. You can also do what I call cherry pick. So for example, I could say I want the 10th of the 1st, and then using the pipe symbol, which is our shift and backslash on our keyboard, and perhaps the 9th of the 1st, and it will pull out anything that it finds. In this case, there wasn't anything on the 9th, so it wasn't able to show us that. Okay, so lots of different filtering that we can use, and these filters apply to anywhere within Navision. But my next filter, I want to actually set so that I can save my view, because when we come out of any list view and have set any filters, Navision will automatically remove those filters for us. But first of all, before I do that list view, I want to just create my new menu button. So just by using the little character down there, the bottom of my navigation pane, I can go to Customize Navigation Pane. I can create new, and I could call it something like My Reports. It's my list, so I call it whatever I like, but not Mr. Reports. And I can even give it an icon of my choice as well, and say OK. Now from my list on my left-hand side, I'm now looking at my reports that I've just created, but I haven't got anything that's listed in there, and it is important to activate that new button by adding a selection to it. So I'm just going to go to Add, and perhaps part of my tasks on a weekly, monthly basis is to actually view GL budgets, for example. So now I have my GL budgets in my new button. I'm going to say yes, I want to update my role center. And so now I have my reports here down in my navigation pane, and indeed there's my GL budgets sitting there. So how do I get things to add to it, and how do I save views? Well, for this, I'm going to go to my customers, and I want to be able to have an ongoing list of all the sales in any given period. To do this, from my customers, I can just simply go to my ledger entries. And at the moment, I'm just going to leave that customer number as a filter on there. I'm going to say I want to have all my current periods. So in this case, it would be in our Cronus database, it would be June. If I put in 0106, etc., then the filter will remain at 106. So there is another option. I can use the P command, and the P is for current period. So now, and you'll notice when I click into that field, it is still showing that P, and that means that when I save my view, as my months roll on, the period will roll on to July, August, etc. Additionally, I want to add a filter for the document type. So realistically, if I'm looking as this is my sales list for the month, I would choose invoices and credit memos. And because I'm on that particular customer, I've now don't have any entries, but of course I want my list to be for all customers. So I can just remove that customer filter, and now I have anything that has been posted in June across my customer base. To save my view, I simply come to our blue box at the top, and again this is the same, any list view you have, whatever subject you're on, you will always have that blue banner at the top there. Save view as, and I will put this month's sales, for example, and then I will choose where I want it to go, and indeed, as I said earlier, I want it to go into my reports. Say OK to that, and I'm just going to, system will just do a quick refresh. So now when I come back to my reports, I've got my this month's sales, and those filters are preset. And again, as I said, because I have that character P rather than putting the date range, as the months move on, the this month's sales will always represent the current month that we're in. So last but not least on this particular section, I did say about items that maybe we don't have access to through our role center. So for example, we have something called fiscal year. Whoops, if spelt correctly. So I'm going to go to the actual menu entries for that, because I want to be able to, if you remember, I'm going to create a new link that allows me to add it to my role center. But depending on what link you are working with, you will have different options as to what you can do on your role center. And to find out, you just simply right click. And in this case, I can actually add my accounting periods to my navigation pane. Whereas if I come to my close income statement, that isn't possible to add it to the navigation pane. However, it will add a quick link to the actions ribbon on my role center. So just to show you that working, I'll actually pop this onto my navigation pane. And it says, do you want to do the changes? Yes, please. So again, it's going to refresh. And there it is now. We have our accounting periods. If I had selected the option where it displays it in the ribbon, then it would have just simply added that close income statement to my ribbon here. And indeed, this is exactly how I've added these entries here for the recurring journals, etc. So worked swimmingly. So let's have a look at what we've got to do next. Recurring sales invoice lines. So this is another feature of, or useful feature of 2018, and it's the ability to create recurring invoice lines for your customers. You can set up multiple different sets of recurring lines for each of your customers. So hopefully that will all add up to increasing the speed of creating those repeat invoices. So going to Navision, we can go to and have a look at one of our customers where we have set up some recurring invoice lines. And in my account, PGF Limited, just go to their card and you will see recurring sales lines here. As I say, you can set up any number of different types of recurring invoices. We'll just go and have a look at this one set up for bicycles. It's Cronus, so of course it has to be bicycles. Basically, you just have to give the recurring lines a name and a brief description. If it is specifically a currency one, then you can add the currency as well here. And in terms of what we can enter on our lines, we can put in the full range as we do if we're creating an invoice manually, so GL account, item, resource, etc. Even as you notice, we have our charge item here as well. You can add in units of measures and quantities. So that's how we set it up. How do we actually run our invoices? So again, from my role center, I've added my create recurring sales invoices batch job here. I simply just say what date I want the invoice to be and then which customer. If I don't populate a customer number here, then it will produce recurring invoices for all of our customers. So in this case, I'm going to use my PGF account and I'm going to pick up that bicycle recurring invoice and say OK, and it tells me that one invoice indeed has been created. So going to my sales invoices, I can see there is my invoice for PGF, and now this is just a standard working document, and I can come in here and create, either change the lines, I can add new lines, I can do whatever it is that I want with this invoice. It's just a way of speeding up that process for calculating or creating invoices that are repeats. And of course, that message, by the way, you can get rid of, which I think a lot of us would probably want to do. So, our penultimate item on today's session is report scheduling. Now, there are a number of reports in NAV that can either take some time to process, dependent on the data that it's working through, or they may need to be run when the users aren't actually posting. So we can now use this report input inbox, fact box, that is part of our role center to set up reports, and when they are being created, we can then use our report box to actually look at the reports themselves. So back to our role center, and this is the report inbox that I was talking about. We go to show queue, and there's one automatic entry that's sitting there at the moment. So we're going to create a new job queue entry. I'm going to use the report, that inventory valuation report, because I want to be able to run it overnight. Some reports require input from the user, and if that is the case, then if you tick the report request paid option, it then highlights those fields that you specify on that report. So for example, I'm starting, in fact, probably what I do, because we're in the new June, so I'd probably do this as 05. And I can tick the box to say whether I want to, in this case for this report, include the expected costs and say OK. I've said that I want to output to PDF, but I have some other options as well. And I would select the print if I was going to send it to print. You'll notice you can also do recurring. So if it was a report that you had to do on a weekly basis, so every Friday, then you can tick the box to say it's a Friday and the start date and ending time when that is going to be run. I'm not going to do it as a recurring one. What I must do, however, is put in the earliest start date and time. And the date is indeed going to be today. She says, picking up the 19th, which was a bit naughty. And then the time. So we're at 10:55 at the moment. So I'll change that to 10:52 and say OK. I'm doing that because I want to come back to it in a second. It's on hold at the moment, so I have to do my status as ready. And that's now good to go and is sitting in my list of reports. So what we're going to do in the meantime, I'm just going to take you through one last thing, which is our ability to be able to do online VAT registration check direct from our customer or vendor. This obviously is a must if you're dealing with European or EU, I should say, customers and vendors, because legally you should have a valid registration number for them. I have a vendor called StarTech, and I'm going to just enter or edit that. And in my VAT number, I'm going to enter the VAT registration number that they have given me, which is 637843 and J. And you'll notice that when I tab off of that field, it says the VAT registration number is invalid. Do you want us to update the name? And I just happen to know that actually Star Technology Services is actually operating under a different name. So in this circumstance, I just have to make the decision as to whether I know about that or not. I'm going to say yes. And then if I drill down into my three dots next to the VAT registration, I can see here that I have accepted that Key Performance, which is the name that StarTech actually are running under, is a valid registration. Okay, so useful little tool there to make sure that you have everything set up for your reverse charge VAT setup. So let's go back to our role center and have a look at our valuation report. And if I run the show, I've set it, if you remember, to PDF. So if it hadn't have run, then I wouldn't be able to see it. But indeed, I can now view my inventory valuation, and where necessary, because I tick the expected costs, I have those expected costs coming through, i.e. it has taken full control from the parameters that I supplied. So I have come to the end of my Finance 10 Top Tips, and I hope you've enjoyed the walkthrough. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, I do appreciate that, but I hope you might find something that will be useful to you going forward. So I will now hand back to Adam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Thanks, guys. Hope you all found that interesting. I appreciate it's quite a lot of information to take in a short period of time. So as I said, I'll get this recording sent over online to you guys so you can view it later on if you wish. If you have got any questions regarding today's session, those are my contact details up on the screen. If you want to pop me an email or give me a call, let me know and we'll see what we can do. So thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for the next webinars that we've got coming up, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.